I got my start in video games by playing Atari, so naturally I've always been interested in their games above all else. In 1984, Atari was split into two companies, and the arcade division, known as Atari Games, had a no-compete clause preventing them from marketing home games under the Atari name. So they created a division called Tengen, or Tengen if you prefer, which means Origin of Heaven, or the center point in the game of Go. So today I want to take a look at the games Tengen published on the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive, as well as some other games related to Atari and Atari games, starting with Arcade Classics. Now obviously this is not a Tengen game. Let's take a look at Centipede first, and as you can see the game looks, okay. Actually, it kind of reminds me of the 7800 version of Centipede. It doesn't look all that bad, really, but trying to play it with the control pad is quite a bit different than trying to play with a trackball. Now here we have what's known as the Sega version of the game, and other than having that really distracting background, the gameplay is identical. The Centipede itself might look a little bit more detailed, but besides that, it's the same game, and honestly I'd rather just play the original version of the game. Then we have Pong, which is pretty nice in the sense that you have a computer-controlled opponent, but I was never able to score against the computer, which makes it less fun. Then here is the Sega version of the game, which doesn't look any different from the classic version. And here's Missile Command, which looks very clearly a derivative of the 2600 version of the game. You can only shoot from the center base, even though you have 3 buttons on a Sega Genesis controller. The cities look almost the same as the 2600, but with a little bit more detail. The missile trails look really bad. You'd think they'd be able to do solid lines. And then here's the Sega version of the game. Again, it doesn't play any different than the original, it just looks a little bit different. I really did not enjoy this version of Missile Command. This really is a half-hearted effort to convert these games, and I really didn't like it. Next we have a Tengen game called Awesome Possum.
I'm awesome!
And obviously it's meant to cash in on the mascot platform genre game. I think in this one you're supposed to stop Dr. Machino, who's like trying to pollute the world or something like that. It doesn't really look all that bad, but the character is very hard to control. His voice is extremely annoying, the level design is terrible, and the collision just sucks. There's some variety in the stages. You've got a forest stage, an underwater stage, some kind of Arctic base stage, I guess that is. And like a trash stage, which honestly, that's where this game belongs, in the trash. Yeah, so I did not like this one.
Come on!
Bubsy! Now the current day Atari has recently purchased Bubsy, so I wanted to mention it here, but at the time Atari and Tengen had absolutely no relationship to this game at all. It's one of the most notoriously bad games on the Genesis, mostly because your character dies with one hit, and he dies really easily, and he makes a lot of annoying comments.
Hey, I didn't write this stuff.
And also he runs really fast, which makes it easy to run into enemies.
That's it, I'm out of here. You can't make me.
But it does have some nice visuals. I like this train stage that we're on here, and the music isn't too bad. I don't know, I think with a few tweaks this could have been a decent game, and who knows, maybe Atari will even make a newer version of it that's actually fun.
Whoa, are you still playing this thing?
Bubsy II. It's more the same with Bubsy the Bobcat, although I think this game is even worse than the original, and that's mostly because of the stage design. I mean, look at this, I can't even get up here. Look at this stage design with just all these platforms everywhere. Who designed this? Homer Simpson? Also, the music is slightly more annoying than the original game. There's 1,000,001 mascot platform games out there, so I suggest playing any one of those over Bubsy II. Here's Cyberball, Atari Games' attempt to make a futuristic football game with robots. And I think they were pretty successful because this game was popular enough for a sequel called Cyberball 2072. The game is a little bit different from regular football in that you only have 4 downs to get to the 50-yard line. Then you'll get another 4 downs to get to the end zone. So after the 4th down, if you haven't reached the 50-yard line or the end zone, then the ball might explode on you. That'll happen if you botch a pass or if the ball comes loose from a run. There's a variety of different offensive and defensive plays that you can select from. Basically what I like to do is select a passing play and then try to go for a long shot every time. Sometimes it works, most times it doesn't. I just feel like a running play is almost impossible to do in this game. The animation of the robots is pretty decent and comparable to the original arcade game, but the field definitely does not look like the arcade at all. The arcade had a very noticeable gradient where you don't get that in the Genesis game at all. The computer is pretty tough in this game and he doesn't make mistakes, so just know that going in. Anyway, this is a decent version of Cyberball and I like it. Davis Cup World Tour Tennis, or just Davis Cup World Tour. This is a pretty decent tennis game with a really cool 3D-esque visual style and some fantastically clear voices. Oh, and the sound effects are really good too. I mean, it really sounds like you're hitting a tennis ball. In addition to the characters, you can also choose from different surfaces. I just prefer to play on grass. Trying to hit the ball can be a little challenging though. There's no marker on the ground where the ball's going to land, so you just kind of have to get your player in the correct position just on your own. And I was never sure how I was hitting that ball, forehand or backhand. I think it does it automatically based on your location to the ball. I made some really bad misses though.
Game second player.
This is not a bad tennis game, but it's certainly no virtual tennis, that's for sure. Dragon's Fury. This is the Genesis version of the TurboGrafx 16 game known as Devil's Crush. I've always heard that this version of the game is not nearly as good as the original, but to be honest with you, it looks and plays pretty close to that Turbo game, as far as I can tell. I believe they changed it up a little bit to make it more dragon-themed versus demonic-themed. Let's check these games out side by side and see if there's anything different. Oh yeah, there's a bigger playfield, and the colors look way better. This is a video pinball game, which I classify as a pinball game that could not exist in real life. I mean, obviously you're not going to have real monsters running around on a table for you to smash. Nor are you going to get these bonus stages where you have to destroy these, I guess they're like wizards or something there on the screen. If you hit that pentagram over there on the right, then the face in the center starts changing. I tried to get it to change all the way into whatever demonic form it was going to be, but I could never quite get it up there. There was always some skeleton or something in my way. I had a blast playing this game. I really loved it. The graphics, the music, the gameplay. It's a lot of fun. Dragon's Revenge. This is another dragon-themed video pinball game, but unlike Dragon's Fury, the graphics are a little lifeless, drab, flat. Not exactly sure how to describe it. Just not as good. The music is a little bit weaker as well. Gameplay isn't terrible, but it seems like the table itself is quite a bit wider than it is tall. There's a lot of stuff over there on the left-hand side, and it's pretty hard to get to.
Congratulations.
What isn't hard to get to are these bonus stages. Just look how derpy they are, though. Looks like a 4-year-old kid drew this in Microsoft Paint. There's a lot of enemies to smash up, so I'll give it credit for that. It is kind of fun hitting the dragon in the face because he'll eventually start spewing fire, but you gotta be careful because he might just eat your ball. This isn't a terrible video pinball game, but it's not really all that great either. Still, I found myself playing it for quite a while. See, even mediocre games can be enjoyable. Gauntlet IV. Here's a game I never thought would appear on the Sega Genesis, but apparently the folks who created this game wanted to prove that they could make an arcade-perfect Gauntlet. In the game, you get to play as either a wizard, a warrior, a Valkyrie, or an elf. Explore dungeons, collect keys, collect food to keep yourself alive, destroy enemies and their monster generators, and generally just see how long you can last.
Wizard now has extra dot power.
In pretty much every version of this game, it just tends to go on and on forever. I know the original 2 arcade games never end. However, this version of the game includes several different modes, including arcade, quest, battle, and record mode. So there is a little bit more depth to this one than you would get with the original. It is pretty amazing to me how arcade accurate this game is. I mean, it looks and sounds exactly like the arcade. And really it should, because the original game came out in 1984, I believe, right about the time when the Atari split happened. And the Genesis is 5 years newer than that arcade hardware, so there's no reason it shouldn't have been perfect. Aside from just the dungeon crawling aspect, what I really love about this game is that you never get bored with the level design, or the look of the levels. There's also a bit of a puzzle aspect to the game where you're trying to find your way out of this crazy maze without dying. There's also a ton of different monsters to fight. You know, you got your standard grunts, you got your ghosts, you got your demons, you got the enemy wizards, and of course my least favorite is Death. I've never quite figured out a good way to take care of him. Of course none of us have. Anyway, if you love the original Gauntlet like I do, then definitely check out this game. Grindstormer. This is a top-down shooter created by Toaplan and published by Tengen. It's your standard shooting game, but it's got some really nice looking graphics, a ton of different styles of weapons, a super weapon, of course, and some pretty good music. Also, I found it to be fairly easy, at least the early stages anyway, which I really appreciate because I suck at shooting games. If I had to knock this game for anything, I think it would be the colors. They seem to be a little bit drab. Also, I do wish there was a little bit more parallax scrolling. And when you get hit, you get sent back to a checkpoint, which I can't stand. I really wish another ship would just come up on the screen. Using the super weapon against these bosses is pretty cool, but look how much flickering there is. Not the best shooting game I've ever played, but still pretty good. I enjoyed it. Hard Drivin. This is a game that I was really surprised appeared on the Genesis, because if you've ever played the original arcade game, there's really just not a lot to it. The real appeal of the game is the sit-down cabinet that you're in. There's a stand-up cabinet too, but it's just not nearly as immersive. Anyway, this is one of the first 3D polygon arcade games, and essentially what you do is you just drive around this track, try not to crash into cars. I think a lot of folks enjoy the stunt track because you get to do that loop-de-loop, but the speed track is pretty cool too. If you want to get far into this game, just don't go too fast, because you will lose control of the car very easily. So you may notice how choppy this game is. Well, I actually counted, and we're getting about 10 frames per second here, which isn't great, but the game is using the native hardware of the Genesis, not any kind of Super FX chip or anything like that. So for the system to do this, it's actually quite impressive. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to this game, but if you spend a few minutes with it, you might actually like it. James Bond 007, The Duel. Ugh, look at that awful image of Timothy Dalton. They massacred my boy! Now, I believe this game was created by Domark, but was released in Japan by Tengen. One thing it's got going for it are some really colorful graphics. But aside from that, it doesn't look like there's much detail. This could almost pass as a Nintendo NES game. Basically, you just play as James Bond, climbing up ladders and shooting enemies and saving prisoners, and then trying to figure out where the heck you're supposed to go. Music is a little repetitive, but it's not terrible. Also, the sound effects are pretty cool with that gun reverberation. And I love how Bond does the contra jump here, rolls himself up into a ball and jumps over this boat. That's pretty funny. Granted, I didn't get too far into this game, but from what I played, I didn't really care for it. KLAX. So at one point, Atari actually had the Tetris license, but then they lost it. I get the feeling that KLAX was a way for them to try to get revenge. The goal of the game is to match up different colored tiles in either 3, 4, or 5 in a row. Sometimes you have to get a certain number of points to get to the next stage, or sometimes you have to get a certain number of claxes, a certain style of claxes, or endure a certain number of tiles being thrown at you. What I really like about it, though, are the colorful graphics and the backgrounds, and especially the sound effects. Now, in the original arcade and in the Atari Lynx version of this game, there's a lot of different voice samples. However, I noticed they don't seem to be quite as prevalent here in the Genesis game. So KLAX may not be as classic as Tetris is, but I still find it highly enjoyable, and even though it's no longer the 90s, I will always find time for KLAX. Marble Madness. I remember seeing the advertisement for this, and it was a picture of Mark Cerny, who was the creator of the game. In the game, you play as a marble who has to get through a very complicated 3D maze. And you have to avoid acid puddles and marble eaters and other big marbles that try to knock you off the stage itself. The graphics here in the Genesis game look, virtually identical to the arcade, which is very nice. Now, the original game had a trackball. This one, of course, you have to use your controller, and it makes it a little trickier, I guess. But aside from the controller, the biggest criticism of the game is the ear-bleeding music. It's just not good, especially this part right here. Ugh. I really wish somebody would hack this game and fix the music, because then it would be perfect. But as it is, the best way to play this game is with the volume turned off. And if you do that, then the game is pretty enjoyable as an arcade conversion. MiG-29. And this is a 3D flight simulator game, which was pretty popular back in the day. I remember playing a game called Jet on my grandfather's original IBM PC. This one starts off with a pretty basic training, and it tells you all the buttons that you need to press in order to proceed. It was pretty fun blowing up those ground targets. I like the polygon graphics too, but the frame rate is very low. Probably even worse than hard driving. After the training, you get to do a mission all by yourself. And I like this view where you get to see all the gauges and dials and controls of the jet inside. There's not much in the way of music or sound effects, aside from that really annoying cycling engine noise. So this game is definitely not for the afterburner crowd, but if you like simulators, this one seems pretty cool. Ms. Pac-Man. This version of Ms. Pac-Man is extremely good. There's a lot of detail in Ms. Pac-Man herself and the ghosts, and the maze itself just looks like it's made out of plastic. Also, you notice that the maze scrolls. Personally, I would prefer if it didn't scroll, if it just had the entire maze on the screen at once. But the scrolling maze doesn't detract from the fun that you get from this game. Of course, as you know, the goal is to eat all the dots, eat all the ghosts, eat the power pellets, and try not to gain weight, I guess. In addition to the original Pac-Man gameplay, you've also got a speed booster, which can make her run a lot faster, and it helps getting out of jams, that's for sure. In addition to the arcade mode, we also have Mini, Big, and Strange modes. I would say Mini is about half the size of arcade mode. It almost fits on the screen. Then we have Big mode, which is almost twice as big as the arcade mode. And then we have Strange, which honestly is kind of annoying because there's these areas that I think I can cut through, but I can't. But it does add to the total package of the game, which is very nice. There is one slight flaw with the game. If you're using a 6-button controller, the control pad will mess up. So you actually have to hold down the mode button when you start up the game. But other than that, it's Miss Pac-Man, it's a great version, and I love it. Here's Pacmania, and I just think of this as a 3D version of the original Pac-Man, but there's really a lot more to it than that. You start off in this block town that looks to be comprised of Lego bricks. Of course, they don't want to say Lego bricks because copyright. Aside from the 3D view, some of the differences here is that you can jump over the ghosts. There's actual music in the game. You can also turn on a pack booster and make him run super fast. And later stages have multiple ghosts to deal with, so it's not always 4. Sometimes you have 5 or 6. Oh, and also in those later stages, the ghosts start jumping at you as well, so you gotta watch out. Jumping doesn't always work. So besides Block Town, we also have this one maze that looks kind of similar to the original arcade game, only in 3D. Then you have this one called Sandbox Land, which I thought it was an odd choice to use pyramids. Then there's this stage here where you're walking over what looks like dangerous platforms, and this is where those ghosts will jump at you. It's the green ghosts that you have to worry about jumping at you. This isn't the greatest Pac-Man game I've ever played, but it's still pretty fun. Paperboy. You play as a paperboy who has to deliver newspapers to subscribers and smash the windows of your non-subscribers. The original arcade game tried to be authentic by using a handlebar controller. Obviously that's not something that you could have here at home, so you're stuck with an original joypad controller. Along the way you have to avoid people in the streets, cars, remote-controlled lawnmowers, people fighting, cats that'll run out in front of you, and other obstacles. Sometimes you can throw newspapers at them to knock them out, which is pretty fun. Oh, take that, you two. This drunk guy walking along, knock him out. And then once you reach the end of the neighborhood, you get to go through this obstacle course. Basically, my goal is just to survive to the finish line. I don't even really care about hitting the targets. The sound effects are good, but what I really love are the voices. The Paperboy's got a bit of a mouth on him.
Okay, now I'm mad.
This is a great port of the original arcade game, and I love it.
Looking for a passenger?
Paperboy II. Apparently the original game was popular enough to create a sequel. The premise of the game is essentially the same as the original, although this time you can choose a paper girl or a paper boy if you want. Along the way you have to avoid obstacles like cars and baby carriages and dogs and monsters coming out of the sewers and all kinds of crazy things like that. About halfway through the stage, you'll notice that the game switches from throwing the papers on the left to throwing the papers on the right. This means you also have to use a different button to throw the paper.
What a great talk!
The gameplay is essentially the same, however there is one huge difference, and that is the angle at which your paperboy throws the paper. He kind of throws them diagonally and forward, so that changes the strategy just slightly.
Okay, now I'm mad.
If you like the original Paperboy, you'll probably like this one too, although it does feel a little bit different.
What a surprise.
Pit Fighter. Before Mortal Kombat was released, this is the earliest digitized fighting game, and I think it was actually pretty successful in the arcades. You get to choose from 3 different fighters: Buzz, the ex-pro wrestler, Ty, the kickboxing champion, and Kato, the 3rd degree black belt. Unlike Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, this game is more of a no-holds-barred punch fest and kick fest. You can even injure your opponent when he's down on the ground. You can also smash boxes over the head of your opponent, and sometimes weapons or power-ups will pop out. Some of the weapons you can find are knives, throwing stars, and sticks. Just gotta make sure your opponent doesn't get them first. If you press all 3 buttons at the same time, your player will perform his one special move. Ty's does like this flipping jump kick in the air, which will knock your opponent out. Also, if you get too close to the edge, some of the spectators will start beating you up. I prefer to let them do that to my opponent instead of me. The music and sound effects do a nice job of replicating the arcade, as far as I can tell anyway. This is a fast and furious fighting game, which really owes nothing to Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. And maybe it's my Atari rose-colored glasses, but I've always kind of liked this game. Primal Rage. This is the other fighting game by Atari Games, and probably the most popular. You choose from 7 different dinosaurs, each with their own special moves. I've always kind of been partial to Talon myself, just because he's small and fast. But Chaos the Monkey is probably the most well known because of his finishing move. The controls are kind of weird. I mean, you've got your standard jumping and moving with the control pad. Then you've got the attacks, which are completely unconventional. You have high quick, high fierce, low quick, and low fierce attacks. How do those correspond to, like, punches and kicks? I have no idea. Trying to pull off the special moves is also quite challenging. What you end up having to do is hold down the attack buttons and then move the controller in a certain way just to pull off those special moves. It's just never made any sense. I've always enjoyed the variety in the backgrounds. The detail is very nice. I also find the music to be quite catchy, and the sound effects sound very painful. Not to my ears, but like, you know, to the enemies. One cool aspect of the game is that you have followers that are kind of getting in the way all the time, and if you do a certain special move, you can eat them to regain some energy. I've always kind of liked this game, even though I have no idea what I'm doing. I just randomly hit buttons and hope to win. Prince of Persia. This was a popular computer game back in the day, and it has appeared on pretty much every system ever since. The way I understand it, Jordan Mechner actually filmed himself, or maybe it was a friend, doing all these moves, which he would then rotoscope into the game. In this game, you have to explore a dungeon and save the princess. You gotta be careful not to fall, you may land on some spikes. Movement can be a little challenging, because you really have to pre-plan what you're going to do. For instance, jumping over a chasm, you have to press the button a little bit early in order to start the jump animation. The Genesis version of this game has got some really nice and detailed graphics, as well as some very clear sound effects. Originally, I didn't care for this game because it just seemed too slow for me, but having played it multiple times on multiple systems, I've come to appreciate it. Race Drivin. The sequel to Hard Driving, but with 3 cars and multiple tracks to choose from. You've got the original track, the Super Stunt track, the Autocross track, and you can also create your own custom tracks. The Super Stunt track is kind of weird. It's almost like the road is floating in the sky, so you have to be extremely careful driving on it. I got to this part here where you're supposed to make this jump, and I crashed the first time, and every time I tried after, I was never able to get enough speed to make the jump. I don't know, this seems like a flaw. In the custom mode, you can select which track pieces you want, but it's very limited. The autocross was pretty nice, except that there's no banked curves, so I ended up slipping off the road quite a bit. And of course we have the original classic track from Hard Drivin' where you can do the loop-de-loop and make a few jumps. I think since Hard Drivin' was created, they made some improvements to this one because the game seems a little bit faster. While Race Drivin' isn't the greatest car racing game ever, it's a pretty decent home conversion of the arcade. And if you just like driving around, doing loop-de-loops and making jumps, then this might be the game for you. Rampart. I've talked about this game many times because it's one of my favorites, and I think of it as kind of an action Tetris hybrid game with castles and cannonballs. Basically what you need to do is defend your castle from an onslaught of invading ships. You need to place your cannons inside the castle walls at strategic locations, use those cannons to attack the enemy ships that are coming in, and then rebuild your castle walls before the timer runs out. If you can rebuild your castle, you'll get more cannons to attack the enemies with, but over time your walls get so beat up, it's almost better to just kind of go around them. What I like to do is create some extra walls for them to destroy, so once my citadel is safe and surrounded, I go ahead and just add a whole bunch of walls off to the side. That gives the ships other walls to shoot at besides mine. This one takes a little while to get used to, but once you understand what's going on, it's a lot of fun. RBI Baseball 3, RBI Baseball 4, RBI Baseball 93, and RBI Baseball 94. These are MLB licensed baseball games where you can play as your favorite team. RBI Baseball 3 is a pretty good game, but the animations and graphics are just lacking. They made some significant improvements in RBI Baseball 4, where there's not only great graphics in the field, but there's also animations on the sides. Then there's RBI Baseball 93, which I imagine they did some improvements, but honestly, it's indistinguishable from RBI Baseball 4. I'm sure this is mostly a roster update. And then we get into RBI Baseball 94. This one has more character animation, which honestly I think is a bit of a detriment. I don't really need to see my batter, preparing to swing. Also, the pitcher's delivery is very weird. It's almost as if he's throwing the ball underhanded.
You're out!
Compare that with RBI Baseball 93.
Strike!
Anyway, these are all pretty decent baseball games, but my favorite is RBI Baseball 4 and RBI Baseball 93. Road Blasters. This is an arcade-perfect port of the Atari game's classic. In the game, your goal is to race in an apocalyptic world, destroying enemy cars and motorcycles, avoiding mines, avoiding turrets, trying not to get shot or crash. You can crash as many times as you want to, but if you run out of fuel, the game is over. So along the way, you'll see these green or red fuel globes, and you want to make sure you catch those. Each time you hit an enemy, your score multiplier will go up by a factor of 1 for a total of 10. At the end of the race, your score determines how much fuel you're going to get back. So if you can somehow hold on to that 10x multiplier, you can last a lot longer in the game. Some of the special weapons you can catch are the Uzi cannon, the nuclear bomb, and the speed up. The Uzi cannon is nice because it doesn't hurt your multiplier if you miss. This is a fantastic port of Road Blasters, and I highly recommend it. Snow Brothers, Nick and Tom. This is one of those single-screen arcade games where you have to jump on different platforms and destroy your enemies. In this case, you throw snow at your enemies to turn them into snowballs, which you can kick and knock into the other enemies. If you can hit multiple enemies at once, you'll increase your score. My strategy is to just go to the very top of the stage, encase one of those enemies in a snowball, and then kicking it to the bottom, knocking everybody out. As far as puzzle games like this go, this one's got some pretty nice looking graphics. Also, the music is quite catchy. This is a fun little action puzzle game, and I like it. Steel Talons. This is a helicopter action game set in a 3D world, much like Hard Drivin' and Race Drivin', although the frame rate is significantly less than either of those games. Now, the original game came with all the different flight controls that you would need, and it made controlling the helicopter very easy. This, however, is a little more challenging to play with a Genesis controller. I don't even bother trying to change the altitude of my helicopter, I just keep it the same. But that's fine, because really all you need to do is worry about looking for enemy tanks and jeeps and buildings to destroy. Once you've destroyed all the enemy targets, you can move on to the next stage. You can destroy your enemies with missiles or guns. I do prefer to use the missiles because it's a little bit faster. On stage 2, they introduce the helicopter enemies, so that keeps things interesting. The polygon graphics are kind of interesting, but as I said, the frame rate is just so slow, it's almost unplayable. Just trying to imagine how great this game would be if they used an SVP chip. Even with the choppy frame rate, I kind of like this game. Alright, well there you go. Atari and Tengen games on the Sega Genesis. What is your favorite Atari or Tengen game? Please let me know down in the comments. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye everyone.